everyone. We are back for our Green Couch Chats. And today we have a really awesome topic. We've got some props or a sweet little baby right here. And today it's expectations around newborns. What should we expect when a baby first comes out of your body? Because I think sometimes that's the thing that a lot of people ask us, like, is this normal? What are they doing here? This feels really weird. Because a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, I've seen like 3 months old, but I actually haven't ever seen a newborn, and they're pretty different.
That's right.
Yeah,
totally. I mean, even I had one dad at a birth tell me once, he's like, take lots of pictures because even by the time you get to like 4 hours, they're different. I'm like, yeah, it's so true. Like they start to like puff up and like move in different ways. Like these little creatures that it's even hard to believe that they were ever inside of you by the time you get to 24 hours, right? And so there's so much transition evolving over those first few days. We really wanted to take an opportunity to talk about it because I think that there are expectations when the babies you're familiar with in your life are like 3 and 6 months old.
Totally.
There are some maybe higher expectations that we have of these brand new babies that have really just arrived. And when you think about the quality of the transition shift, it's huge.
Huge.
I mean, they went from being fishes to being land animals in like
a pretty short amount of time.
Right?
Well, depending on but yes, a relatively short amount
of time, right? And that in and of itself is huge. I mean, really I talk to people all the time, like they never knew hunger and thirst. That's not a thing that they know, right? True. They had on-demand food delivery right to their belly for their entire existence. And suddenly now they have to integrate these sensations in their body that are supposed to tell them when to eat and drink. It's pretty phenomenal. And so the whole point of today's episode is to like walk through some of those big milestones that happen in the first couple of days and really how to navigate them. And, you know, I think it's more about managing, about managing our own expectations rather than kind of like making the baby accommodate to any specific behavior at any specific time.
I also think that like a lot of our friends that we get advice from forget this time. And so whatever stage their baby's in right now is the stage their baby's in right 100%. Now. And so they're like, oh no, all you have to do is blah, 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 blah.
Absolutely.
You also have to be very careful when anybody gives you advice or you read anything on the internet or books where they're like, this is the way to work with all babies.
Absolutely.
There's just no the way, right? There's many ways and it's really open. I think that also like, I think this generation has gotten so into data because there's just all these like, what's the answer? I don't know. I'll just like Google it. But like, we have to remember that like the universe didn't write that. Like a human being or maybe even like a robot now, I guess, whatever, wrote that. And so I think maybe that's also part of this discussion, like what's actually happening with babies and like how do we go to support that based on like kind of who your baby is coming into this world.
Absolutely.
Not like these are these, this, do this, do this, do this, and then you'll have like a great life.
Exactly.
That's so wild.
Well, I mean, I think we can both agree as parents to 3 children that like we didn't do all that much different between our children, and yet we can both say different. That all 3 are pretty wildly different.
Yes.
And, you know, I didn't change that much between any of my parenting journeys to say that that explains that. So 100%. There is some sort of like native personality that is already happening, right? It's already happening before we ever meet your baby, and being like humble to the fact that okay, maybe my friend did it this way and maybe that worked for their baby, but it's not maybe going to work for my baby because my baby is a whole different person.
Oh my God, yes. I couldn't like agree more. I had twins and they couldn't be more different. I really raised them the same.
Right, exactly.
Like, we're eating at the same time, we're pooping at the same time.
Good experiment right there. 2 different children.
And you've met them. They couldn't be more different.
Couldn't be more different.
So. Okay, let's hear all about it.
Well, will we start at birthday?
Yeah, I think we start at birthday. Okay. I'm going to hold my, you know, little bit older baby. He's just calm and chilling here.
But I have my brand new baby right here, my brand new baby. And the reason why I brought out my brand new baby complete, with my pelvis and my like little amniotic sac and my placenta and all that goodness, is because we really want to get a sense of like what is happening. Why is this my my amniotic sac is
Here,
turned
let me
up
help. You can talk
inside
and
out.
I'll put this in.
And we really want to get an understanding of what babies are going through. Let's not do a preview.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this baby is not coming through that way.
So babes are inside, right? And they're in this little home where they're practice breathing fluid, right? And they have this whole bypass system, so they're not even using their lungs. They're happily floating in this really well insulated area, right? And they're getting fed through this cord inside that's bringing them all their nutrients, all their fluids, right? Pretty even keeled day as things go, right? And then Labor Day happens, right? And we're gonna fast forward and get to like the spicy
water has
part.
Broken. It's
Water
happened.
is broken. Baby's coming down into the pelvis, right? And now this baby has to navigate this journey. And I want to pause here for a second and just emphasize that, you know, like, have you ever slept on a couch on a Saturday night and you wake up in the morning, you're like,
yeah, totally,
right? Babies can be like that on like steroids, right? Like the way a baby is, and I've felt babies in some funky positions in there, right? They can be in these weird old places for a while, right? So let's just keep that in mind to start.
Totally. I'm going to take this sack off.
Yes, baby's emerging, right? The work of labor is happening. They're coming down through this pelvis. They've got all these beautiful reflexes that help them, right? They're pushing into the top of the fundus. Their head is negotiating all of these turns. They're really working just as hard as you are to come on out. And when they do, right, we're coming out, they're born. Beautiful.
Oh,
they did not avulse their cord. And they come up onto you, and now they have to do so many things, right?
Yes.
They have to take their first breath of air. And in that whole bypass system for their lungs has to suddenly stop working, and they need to start using their lungs. They need to start bringing like oxygen into their vessels, right? They're breathing through their nose and their mouth, and they're accommodating a whole new system. So that's like the big transition.
Totally.
Not to mention the fact that they've come through a really small passage in kind of a tenuous way, right? A lot of tension on the head and neck as we're making that transition. And as much as we're programmed to do this, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy on our body, right? It's still a pretty big workout. So baby arrives at the chest. And remarkably, for most babies that are making this transition well, they have an instinct to just start hunting around, right? You've noticed that your areola have gotten darker. That's really to accommodate their very poor sight, right? They can really only see contrast in those first few days. And that's their homing weekend, right? So you'll
plus also the Montgomery glands. We can't not talk about that.
Smell like your amniotic fluid, right? So your breasts are secreting fluid that smells like their home, right? So we've got a lot of really impressive systems to help this baby get latched, and also brand new skill, right? They have some inborn reflexes that help them get closer to what we want them to do, but it is at its very core a brand new skill. So inviting that baby to stay nice and warm, comfy, cozy on your chest, letting them hear your voice, letting them hear all the sounds, your breathing, your heart rate that sound like really familiar to home, right? Helps them integrate all those signals and participate a little bit more. But that golden hour is so important. It's so important that we cue into these first few moments of them being like, hey, I'm curious, like, what's happening in this world around me, right? And supporting them and knowing that some of this is exploration, some of this is new. So when they get close, if they're licking, sniffing, these are all the first cues that we're looking for. And we want to be supportive and also have some like grace that maybe those first couple of latches maybe won't be the most comfortable thing that will happen, right? We can do things to help, but this is all about learning, right? They're just learning in these first couple of hours.
I love this idea of the golden hour. I talk about it often. And I think that it's important to remember there's also a ton of hormones involved in this, right? And so at the very time of birth, you get this big surge of epinephrine, norepinephrine, both you, the birthing person, and these mics.
I know.
Who knows what you're hearing over there? You both get these big surges of these kind of, we call stress hormones, but actually it's stress in a good way. Because if you've ever been into a situation where you're like stressed, you also are like, I can see everything. Like I can see in the dark, right? Yeah. You're just so alert. You're so in tune. And hormonally, that's helping you when you first meet your baby and your baby meeting you, that everyone in the room is like, oh, we're here. I'm observing everything. I'm seeing every smell. I'm remembering it. It's getting into my brain in a way that like nothing else does. Like in times where your body is like, everyone be on alert, it also goes into your programs into your brain in a slightly different way. You remember these moments and you connect and you're like awake and alert. Usually by 2 hours, everyone's like, leave me alone, I gotta take a nap, right? Like, please, this was a long day for everyone. So why not maximize this time when like you're getting driven by your hormones to be awake, to be stimulated, to be alert. Plus, also, you've got oxytocin, which like everybody is like all obsessed with oxytocin and labor. But guess what? It also does amazing things. It doesn't go away.
Yeah, it actually continues, and it is one of the biggest hormones that's involved in our lactation journey.
Yes.
Right?
And thank you, oxytocin.
It keeps us enthusiastic about it. It keeps us going through it. And so remember, like as much as that sleep deprivation might be like gnawing at you, you are going to have superpowers in this period of time to cope with it because of that beautiful oxytocin that's just like coursing through you. You're like, I'm so tired and also so in love, right?
It's true. They did a small study on mice where they took away their oxytocin receptors, and oddly, they were able to give birth. They were able to use a different hormone to get into those receptors and give birth, but they were never able to nurse because you really need the oxytocin to squeeze the musculature around the ducts in the back of your breast or chest tissue to be able to actually squeeze it out. And so we have to remember how important oxytocin is, but it's so amazing that like it squeezes milk to make it readily available for the baby. It cramps our uterus to make sure we don't bleed. And it's a pro-social hormone that like makes us make eye contact. It wants us to feel involved with the person. Whenever you get big surges of oxytocin, it makes you feel like, I love everyone. Like anyone had like post-orgasm, like, oh my God, this could work. And then you're like a few hours later, you're like, actually just kidding. Just kidding. But you know, it's that feeling of like, oh, like, yes, I'm in love, whatever. So it's like, you're alert. You're like taking it all in because thank you, epinephrine, norepinephrine. You are in love. You are feeling connected. You are like getting this person into your tribe, right? Like that's what's happening right now. They're part of your community. But thank you, oxytocin. And then you've got prolactin, which also all of that touching of the skin and just stimulating the nipple, that releases prolactin that's helping you to make milk and also has some impacts on kind of your well-being and how you're feeling. And so when you think about the first latch, licking, nuzzling, rubbing on the nipple. If your baby's not able to be with you, you touching your nipple, rubbing your nipple, kind of working around it. Those are all really important things to get that milk to come in, and also to start getting that hormonal kind of flow happening. But I feel like I have to pause for 1 second because it's like coming up. So I was like, I have to say this. We talk about skin to skin, and it is so unbelievably important. I think it's like, you know, so many various reasons hormonally and all of those things. But if you give birth and you're like, I need to take a beat, like I feel like I just went through something pretty big, someone else in the room can also do skin to skin.
100%.
So I have to like always feel like I've said that. And for partners or for people supporting people giving birth, like if you notice that you're like, oh, like I'm just feeling a little whatever, please like say like, hey, can someone take this kid for just a quick second, get yourself together, like need a little splash of water, like whatever you need to do to feel like in the right place to meet your baby, do that. I feel like there's sometimes feels like a lot of pressure to like just get their baby up and then all of a sudden I'm supposed to be in love. And then when you don't feel that or you're feeling overwhelmed, it can feel like, oh, that's not how I'm supposed to be feeling. But like the reality is however you're feeling in the moment is how you're supposed to be feeling, right? Like that's the reality. So I always want to give permission for people to say like, if you're not feeling skin to skin right at that moment, that's fine. Like
take a minute.
Yeah.
There are other skins in the room.
100%. Be like, hey, can you go ahead and real quick and do some skin to skin?
That's right. Take off your shirt. Hold the baby.
Let's do this. I always tell partners, bring like a zip up hoodie or bring like a little button up something.
Snuggle that baby right in there, right in there.
Exactly. So I feel like I had to say it. I was like, we're talking about skin to skin,
important.
but
but I did want to take an opportunity to go back to that baby and that Saturday night couch thing. Like I really emphasize this quite a bit. So, you know, we could probably do several episodes on things like tongue ties and lip ties and all the things that can affect lactation. And in fact, this is by no means a lactation, like a full lactation episode, right? We're not really going into that prep world at all. But what I do want to take time to really like understand the nuance around is this. sometimes latches don't feel good. And in fact, the statistics tell us, they did a 500-person observational study, and they found that 92% of people reported some degree of difficulty with nursing by day 3 postpartum. So if you are experiencing some difficulty, you are actually really, really, really not alone.
Totally.
Right?
You're in good company.
There's a lot of people out there. And part of the reason why is that baby is unfolding. They are really acclimating to this new world they're in. And maybe you can't see this detail here, but what they're trying to show you on the head of this baby is the soft spots. And what that represents is that their skull bones aren't fused. And part of the reason why that's super important is so that they can mold and shape to fit through the pelvis, right? But in that sense, they also have to unfold and unmold, right? And all of that influences how their head, neck, tongue all work, right? Yes. And so a tongue is actually controlled by 8 different muscles, right? 4 extrinsic, which means that they're outside of the mouth, and then 4 intrinsic, which means they're inside. And one of the pediatric dentists that we work with, actually, I love the way he says this. He's like, nursing is the most complex thing you ever have to do with your tongue, right? And so we really need to understand the interplay of all of that. Babies need to do hard work, right? They need to generate negative pressure with their mouth. They need to do this peristalsis, so this wave-like motion with their tongue. It's a lot of coordination. And if they're still unfolding, if they're still adjusting to extrauterine life, we need to make accommodations and give space for that to evolve, right? And I think a lot of the time when you look at the statistics around people who give up nursing early, it's because they're not getting support around the reality of this, right?
I love that.
Sometimes in those early days, we just need to do a lot more support of that little one. And, maybe by day, 14, they're completely unfolded. And they're in great shape, and they're nursing like champs, and you forget those early days. But those early days are different because they're still unfolding. And so, you may have heard about people talking about tongue ties, that lingual frenulum right underneath the tongue being tighter. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail about that. There can also be an upper lip tie. So right here, that little frenulum, that can be tighter. That's not the point here. I think the point here is that it's really hard to distinguish in those first few days what is what, right? Between that, the head and neck tension that can come with just the process of being in utero and being born, and then some of that other stuff, right? And so, anybody who's really a black and white thinker who's saying, oh, that's a tongue tie, we got to clip it, or that's definitely not a tongue tie, I don't actually buy any of that crap, right? You actually need to see how that kid evolves and changes. And you might be thinking to yourself, but I actually need to nurse this baby and get through this. And so that's where it's really important to engage folks around you, like good postpartum support, good lactation support. Who's going to be there to help you? Sometimes it does actually, in fact, take 4 to 6 hands to nurse one single baby. Right? Totally. To get everything set up in the way that you need to get it set up in order to accommodate your early nurser who's really still trying to figure out the ropes, right? And so, in those early days, if you are having some difficulty, if it is feeling pinchy, stingy, burny more than the first couple breaths of latching, right? That is your call to be like, I should probably get some more hands here, some more support.
I need a few more hands.
Right. Yeah. Because it does take, there's this, I know you and I talk about it. One of the ways to get little babies to open up a little bit wider is to give them a little bit of a squish in, but also target this reflex. They have a little magical reflex where you like squish on their palm. They just open up a hair bigger, right? That literally takes 4 hands. It literally takes 4 hands. 100%. And so really support here, I think, is the really strong underlying theme to all of this, right? The reason why it takes a lot is because everyone's learning.
Oh, I love that. Everyone's learning. I tell people all the time, like, we are not meant to do this alone. No. Like, we're not meant to do it alone. No. We're meant to be in community when we're raising our babies, right? Like, can you imagine being like out in like whatever, like with lions and stuff, and being like, oh, I guess I'll just like figure this all out by myself. Like, no, there was like a whole community that was like, hey, I got you. Let me hold your baby so you can like go pee in that bush or whatever you're doing.
I better eat my placenta really fast so that a lion doesn't come
for reals,
me, right? Like these are the things that we feel very grateful that we don't have to do now. And yet we practice in San Francisco. Yeah. We have a lot of folks who live in an orphan city, meaning that their family and friends are far away from here. Yeah, a ton. And a lot of people are really trying to hobble through this without much in terms of like real support. I don't mean like somebody who's going to be there to text you. Like that's important too. But this is like hands, actual hands. Who's going to empty your bathroom trash can?
Yes.
Who's going to get you 5 more pillows because you found the perfect latch and you now need to hold it, right? Like these kinds of things take hands, and the expectation that we can just kind of like hole up in private and do it is, I think, what makes it really hard.
I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. Like it is really not, we're setting people up for a really hard transition into parenthood too, right?
Yeah.
When you think you just have to like, I'm just gonna have to like power through
muscle
this.
Through it, muscle through it.
It's like, no, like there's like so many resources. And I mean, San Francisco, we're actually like unbelievably lucky.
Yeah.
But even just like taking a class and being like, oh, I learned this new thing. I'm going to teach this to the people that are going to be around me, and then having them just be there to support. Or if you don't have somebody, thinking about like, where can I get it?
Yeah.
Like maybe that's not like within my like money situation right now. That's fine. Like where else can I get it? How else can I, what resource? I can listen to this podcast and I can get some tips, and then I can remember that like this is this new baby that's unfolding. We were also thinking about, when we were talking ahead of time, about how babies come into this world sometimes really alert and sometimes not, and how sometimes it takes a few days. So we were thinking about that. And I was thinking about this idea that like we see so many newborn babies, and how some babies are like, hi, I'm like here. Like I was just telling her the other day, this past January, every baby I saw like was like bright-eyed looking at me, like alert and like here. I don't know if you noticed that in your practice this month.
I had all sleepies.
Oh, you had all sleepies. Okay, you got all the sleepy babies. I got all the awake babies. I was like, what's happening? Like everybody was like, hi, like, which was so crazy. And then sometimes you see we were like sleepy, right?
Oh man, our biggest challenge
is
like,
you there?
Please wake up. My biggest trick now, like I have to put this in there because this is my biggest trick. If your baby is too sleepy to nurse, undress them and put them flat on the back in their bassinet. They will 100% wake up.
Yes, I love
100% of the time. 100% of the time.
Yes.
So that actually brings us to like another really important segue, which is like, my baby will only sleep on me.
Oh man.
Yes.
That's true.
That is true. Yeah. That's all I got. That's the end of that sentence, really.
I mean, they were in you like a minute ago. To think that they're like, oh, now that I'm out of that warm, cozy place where I was fed through my belly button.
Where we're like, hold this for a second. We're like, here, baby.
Yeah. Go lay down on this hard surface. It's wild.
It's wild that we have this expectation. And it's also, I mean, this is a broader theme, but like, I would prefer, and in my practice I teach people how to safe co-sleep.
Yes,
because
I do too.
Regardless of whether you intend to or not, a lot of people do.
100%.
And then they feel a lot of guilt and shame for doing it. And they feel hyper alert and anxious about it.
Which is totally unfounded.
It's totally unfounded. Yes. I will tell you that for as long as we have been making babies as a human species, people have been co-sleeping.
Yes.
There may be reasons. Nobody wants to have SIDS happen in their family to their baby. And I get that. I do. And also, postpartum folks are dealing with enough. Let us not layer on stress and anxiety from like, this baby absolutely must sleep in a bassinet.
Yeah, it's wild. And so much of it also comes from liability from a hospital.
100%.
So like the big things you see flashing, on the screen saying like, never sleep with your baby in the bed. That has to do with their own personal liability versus anything that's actually well-founded in research.
Totally.
Is it the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine? I always say it wrong. Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine, is that the name of that? They came out with a fantastic review of the literature in terms of safety of bed sharing and for folks that are nursing. And so I encourage everybody to check out their protocol. It's completely like public and free. You can go on their website and just type in bed sharing.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Great. Love that also. Thank God somebody knows how to do all that stuff. But I think it's important for us to actually pause when we're thinking about recommendations. And I know we talked about the last episode too, of like, where is it coming from?
Right.
Is it founded in research? And also, does it fit with my lifestyle and viewpoints? Because it has to be both. Like if bed sharing brings you so much anxiety that you can't do it, fine. Maybe that's not for you. Like,
exactly.
But if like it's bringing you, I've had so many people tell me I can't sleep because my baby's far away. And I'm like,
then don't keep
bring
your baby far away.
Bring your baby close. Like that seems fine. I think we keep getting taught to like ignore all of our instincts as like parents of like, oh, you know, I want my baby to be next to me. It's like, yeah, you do. And guess what? Your baby also wants to be next to you.
They were. This is
totally.
They were really like
They were
legitimately
like next
right
to you.
there. And I mean, talk about like the sensory differences. What we're in, like, it's never cold inside of you. Never. They've never experienced cold. They've never experienced flat, right? They've never experienced so much of this thirst, hunger, all of these sensations, all brand new, right? And now we are like, do this thing that feels completely foreign to you and do it in a relaxed state.
Right. Yeah. Just go to sleep. And you're like,
It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's almost an impossible ask, right? And so, you know, we can also put in the show notes things about like there's resources around safe co-sleeping out there, which I think is, you know, it's not for everybody. But what I did, I just had a postpartum visit where the dad was like, they were really against the whole notion of co-sleeping because of this messaging that's out there. And he's like, well, what if I just like went and slept in the recliner in the other room with the baby on me? And I was like, wait, that's actually the most dangerous thing to do. So actually those smothering accidents that do happen, they're happening on couches. They're happening in recliners.
Exactly.
So when people are desperately trying not to co-sleep,
it's wild. Yeah.
They end up in more tenuous situations. And that's such an important thing to underscore here, right? If your instincts are telling you that this baby needs to sleep with you, then sleep in a way that feels safe for everybody.
Yes, I agree. I couldn't agree more. Set yourself up.
Set yourself up for success.
Yeah, because if you're nursing, you're gonna fall asleep with your baby at some point. Like it's a fact. So set yourself up into a space that feels safe for everyone.
100%.
I love that. What else should we talk about babies? Is there anything else? We talked about unfolding, which is so important. We talked about skin to skin and all like the hormones that come in there. We talked about some expectations around sleeping. And
well, let's talk about those unfolding babies and like what's within the range of expected and what's
I
love
not,
that, right? And
love
what
that.
you can do about it, right?
Yes.
So if your baby is having some of those, one of my like big tip-offs that we've got some head and neck restrictions, right? Is let's say we're cross cradle nursing on this side and everything's feeling pretty decent. You're like, that's actually a comfortable enough latch, right? And then you go and do this and you're like, oh my God, that's so awful. 100%. I hate that. That's like really, really pinchy. They can't do it. That food must be raw. Like there must be something wrong with the boob. So that is probably a baby who is having a hard time accommodating a full twist to one side or another, right? Totally. And so when we have that in the short term, the solution for that is really just let your baby be in the position that makes it work for them. So if it's cross cradle on this side, then we just football on this side, right? That allows that baby to really kind of feed in the way that feels good for them in the short term, and gives you some comfort, right? So this is what I work on when we get into beds with people in their homes. This is the kind of stuff we're working on. I oftentimes find, and I don't know if this is true in your practice too, but like we get to day 6 and we're still having some of that imbalance, and I'm thinking about maybe getting that baby some additional body work.
Oh yeah.
Because a lot of the time that unfolding baby thing, 3-4 days, and you can see a lot of improvement just from them like laying on your chest, moving their own head around, right? Another little trick there, if you have a baby, and a lot of parents will note it themselves, that are like, they will only look this way, right? I put their head this way and they're like, right? Yeah. That's a big tip off. Babies want to look towards you, where your smell is coming from, where your sound is coming from. And so if this is the way they're laying in their bassinet, let's just 180 that situation, right? So put them down next time this way, and they'll want to naturally gravitate towards looking towards you. So there's some things that we can gently do at home for sure. But yeah, I would say that if I'm coming over for your day 6 visit and that baby is still having a really strong preference on one side and still kind of having one side that they're not nursing super well on, I'm thinking, you should probably attend to some of that head and neck restriction stuff. I don't know. I
totally think so. I couldn't agree more. I think I loved the way that we kind of started with like how you talked about the unfolding process of just like being like this
Yeah.
and then having to be like, oh God, like how do I lay? Like now there's gravity, like what's happening, right? I also think like it's a nice opportunity to start like touching your baby and like doing some massage and kind of like some of the body work like craniosacral are so gentle and so lovely. So I always say like seek out that if you can, for sure. But some gentle ways, like I don't even know if this camera can pick it up, and the podcast part is like, what are you doing? So I'm gonna try to like talk it through, but hopefully we can all see. So like simple things to think about is that like head, shoulders, hips, those are all connected, right? So like if you clench your butt right now, you'll notice that your jaw kind of clenches, right? Or like if you're feeling like, oh God, my hips are like weird, then all of a sudden you'll be like, oh wait, also my shoulders are too. Like I just also realizing that. So loosening up other parts of their body can also be super helpful. And like anytime you do any kind of infant massage, you want to make sure that you're like, hi, how are you? You've been fed and you're feeling so comfortable now, and you're just a brand new baby, so you only maybe have like 5 minutes in you of attention, and that's fine. That's how much I'm gonna ask you for. And if you do it when a baby's crying and they're tense, like no, this is not the point of it. The point of it is to get a baby when they're like in that zone. Exactly. Yes. And the first thing I always kind of start with is doing a little bit of like hip work. And sometimes you do like a little light vibration on them. It just gets them into like a little like neurologically, they're like, oh, what is that? There's like a lot of signals coming, and they kind of calm themselves down. So once they're in that calm state, I first kind of like to rotate their hips a little. And then I often try and do a little psoas release. It's a really lovely stretch. Like it's kind of like what you would do if like you put the foam roller kind of right in your low back sacrum area, and you like get your legs over the side to kind of stretch out and release that area. And what I do is I kind of take my 2 fingers, I put them on either side of the sacrum, which is kind of that triangle bone in between your hips and the back, like where what we would call maybe our tailbone-ish, like right above there. And I would take, oh yeah, there you go. Perfect. We have a model right there. And if you, oh yeah, I forgot we had this thing sitting here. If you take your fingers and kind of place them right here, like along this joint, you can really feel it once you kind of get your fingers and you're like, oh yeah, I can feel it, that there's some mobility there. And what I'm trying to do is take my hands and tilt it this way, because there's a big muscle that comes along here through the pelvis and attaches in there. So if I can do a little stretch, it might be able to stretch and release this muscle that's coming through, because they're just like this. So what you want to do is you do a little rocking, kind of towards, I don't know how to describe it in words. I'm trying to do it for people listening. Towards you, I guess.
Like a hip tilt.
Like a hip tilt.
Most people are really familiar with that.
Hip tilt, pelvic tilt, something like that.
If you've done yoga or Pilates at all, you're familiar with this hip tilt.
Hip tilt. There you go. That's exactly how to describe it. And then you put your thumbs on their upper thighs, and you do not force it. Right. This is not force. A psoas muscle is so sensitive. It's where we keep a lot of like our trauma and stored emotions and all those things. Like it does not want to let go. Like just by force. It never will let go by force, actually. Like that's what it's designed to do. And so you have to just like coax it. So put your fingers on the top, and then all of a sudden you'll notice they'll like extend one leg. Like it happens with every baby. They'll extend the leg, and you're like, oh cool, you did it. Let's do the other side. And then all of a sudden they'll extend both legs, and then you know they're ready for that stretch, and that's always nice and relax. And then you do a little. That's a nice way to get started. And oftentimes we'll just kind of release them. And then once you've got that loose, then you can go kind of lift up and go a little side to side. So stretch out that side body right in there. So a little stretch to this side, a little stretch to this side. And then you get into the arms and really start rotating their arms around those joints, those shoulder joints. And it might take a while to get that. Like you might not get a full rotation for a couple of days, and that's fine. Like they were crunched up in your belly. I don't expect it. But starting to get some of that rotation, you'll start to notice that their whole body loosens up. And then the last thing is kind of, you can let them sit on your lap here and let their head hang a little bit and start to kind of stretch up, because they've got their chin tucked in so much, right? And we love a good tuck for labor, but after labor, we like a good extension. We're really asking the baby to do the exact opposite of what they did the entire time in their room. I've never actually thought of it that way, but it's totally true. We ask them to be completely flexed
Tucked.
and tucked in the womb because that's going to be easier.
And to like blossom and open, right?
We're like, when the baby's nursing, have them extend their mouth, and you're like, oh wait, they've just been tucked for the past whatever.
It's like being in cow the entire time,
right?
And then going to cat suddenly,
I was like,
Like,
what
it's
is
really
happening?
A lot. It's really a lot.
That's such a good analogy. I've never thought about it that way. Thank you, Kelly. This is great. We're learning new things too. So getting a little bit of that neck extension just by like laying them safely on your lap, you've got a really good grip on them, and just letting their head kind of hang there really gently and lightly. If it feels like too much extension, just bring them forward a little bit so they're not too, and that can really help because it just kind of stretches out these front muscles that have just been so tight. And then also the rotation, like you were saying, like get your head over here next to their ear and be like, I'm going to rub your cheek over here. Oh, you're going to turn over here. Okay, great. Then I'm going to rub my cheek on this side. Okay, great. You can also take, if like your partner wants to do it, but they're like not turning their head because, you know, whatever, you can get a cloth and rub it on your Montgomery glands, and babies will preferentially turn their head to the smell coming from Montgomery.
Your last bra that you were wearing.
100%.
Whatever.
Throw that, and then they might add, and like put it on this side.
A little bit of rotation for that.
Exactly. So
my other one that I really like a lot, and you touched on it initially, is the rhythmic exercises.
Oh yeah.
So just good. Like really gently kind of like holding your baby and like having them on a flat surface, and you can do it on their sides too, but just like gently doing this like little bit of traction on their hips. And what that does is it encourages, just like a chiropractor would do for us, it encourages this lengthening in the back of the neck, right? And you can do it on the sides as well. And, you know, to Serena's point, like this is a thing that we do with happy babies, right? We don't ever want a baby to feel stressed by this because it is totally working in the opposite direction if a baby is fighting us on this. It's actually building tension, right? And so this is a baby who is happy, who's relaxed. Babies also, I mean, to go back to that in utero state, they're touched all the time. They're touched all the time. They're rubbing up against your internal organs, your body, your pelvis, your bones, your rib cage, everything. They're touching everything. And so babies oftentimes really like this signaling that they get from being massaged because it feels so much more like home. And you may think, oh, I'm holding my baby a lot, but that's so much different than the experience that they're having inside, right? They've done these ultrasound studies where like babies will literally just like, kind of like how a cat will rub up against your leg, they'll kind of like squish up into something just to like feel the sensation. Like, oh, look, there's something there. Like, you're like, my rib, right? My rib. That's like their exploring of their environment. And then, you know, they come out. If you're in a hospital environment, they're turbo swaddling them and putting them in a bassinet. And they lose that kind of sensory input pretty fast. And so if we just do these small little steps, it really can help in the integration process.
Oh, I love that. I really feel like we've touched on something like so incredible that like I knew somewhere but have never actually like conceptualized maybe or like said. Like it's so beautiful what you're bringing up, which is this idea of like they're touched all the time, they're warm, and they're fed.
All the time. And then we withdraw that. And it may not seem like that much withdrawal, but when it's 24/7, even if it becomes suddenly like 12 hours of the day that we're doing that kind of stuff, it's a 50% decrease in that, right? Which is huge. And so as we're bridging between extrauterine life and intrauterine life, like think about that. We are crossing a bridge, and it is not something that happens in just the moment of the birth. It happens in those first several days. And we just want to be there in the capacity. And it doesn't have to be just you, which I think is a lot of pressure for birthing folks, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that.
Everyone
involved.
Right? Take turns. If you have your folks around you, to hold a brand new baby.
It's everybody. The best.
So like invite them over. If you need a minute, let that baby nap on someone else, right? This is part of their learning process. This is part of their integration process. One of my favorite things around soothing is like babies don't actually self-soothe without having been soothed hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of times. That is how they learn that skill, from us soothing them. And so when we're bridging these two worlds that they're in between, like, let's be really mindful of that.
I love that. Oh, now we're like holding our babies. I know they're pretend, but I think we've like touched everything. I don't know. thank you so much for joining us and tuning in. And like, please reach out to us. You can find us at Hatch on Irving. And then you can also find me at the Kaz Project. So please reach out anytime with questions or anything.
Totally.
Thanks for joining us. And I hope you really enjoy that new baby smell. It's actually the best. We didn't even talk about it, but it is the best.
Professional baby heifers.
Professional smellers of babies. It's amazing. Okay.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.